tend to be lighter in color. Another reporter. Let's say you're in an earthquake of 6.5 or 7. You're going to be very aroused. And days, weeks later, if someone were to come up behind you and clap their hands really loud, you'd jump. And that's because you'd be sensitized, all right? And so that's the type of learning that we studied. So to sensitize a snail, we gave them a series of electrical shocks. And following the delivery of those electrical shocks, if you touch the animal on a specific part of its skin, it'll have a contraction. It'll contract very strongly. Whereas the same tap, depending on the strength, would, before the shocks, produce just a very modest contraction, or maybe no contraction at all. And this reverses its learning. It's a very simple. We trained a group of snails by giving them electrical shocks. We tested them to make sure that they were sensitized. We tested their reflexes to see that they were sensitized. And then we dissected out their nervous systems and extracted the RNA from those nervous systems. We purified the RNA, then we dissolved it in solution and injected it into naive snails, snails that had not received the electrical shocks. And then 24 hours later, we tested the reflexes of those snails, and we found that they were enhanced, just like the snails that got the electrical shocks. There's the siphon. Okay, that's the contraction. We did a control, of course, and the control was we took a group of snails that had not gotten the electrical shocks. We took the RNA out of their nervous systems. We dissected it into yet another, we injected it into yet another group of untrained snails, and they didn't show the reflex enhancement. So that meant that it wasn't, this reflex enhancement wasn't the result of some, it being injected or some non-specific. Okay, so there's the siphon. Okay, now the first time it gets a contraction, it may last a certain amount of time. But as you give it more tests, then that will gradually go away, and that's the habituation. Your brain is made up of neurons, and those are the main cell body type in your brain. And, well, at least that's the part that stores the information. And those cells, neurons, are connected with each other. And those connections are known as synapses. So the synapse is where the electrical impulse goes from one neuron to the next. So that's a synapse. And we wait until the siphon comes back out, and that's an indication of we give them lettuce and they do all right with that. The current main model of of the biology of memory is that when an animal learns something, there's changes in the strength of synaptic connections. There are new connections that grow, some get stronger, some get weaker. And the idea is that the memory is stored as in those synapses as a synaptic rearrangement. And experiments that we had done over the last 5 years suggested to me that probably was wrong. If you spend enough time with them, you really see why they've survived all these years so successful. I've been working on how synapses reorganize during learning for 35 years. And it was only recently that I became dissatisfied with that hypothesis. And it was based on other research that we've been doing. And so that led me to this experiment. Touch the siphon, okay? So I'm going to come down here. There's the siphon, and I'm going to touch it. Okay, now there's the contraction, okay? There are two broader significances. First of all, we're not going to be able to transfer memories that most people think of as memories between humans anytime soon. So our study doesn't imply that that's possible. Okay, but there are two things that it does imply. The first, from a scientific viewpoint, is that if we're right, it really strongly suggests that the dominant model of how memories are stored in neuroscience is incorrect, and we have to rethink it. So to me, that's very exciting. But I think there's another more practical aspect of these studies that are intriguing, and that is that, again, if we're right, then it could lead for new treatments for a variety of disorders of the brain. So it could lead to treatments for dementia, Alzheimer's disease, and conversely, it could lead to more effective treatments for post-traumatic stress disorder, trauma. But that's okay. I'm old. All right. So look, I want you to see this because it's just so cool. Okay. So what you're going to see